Cheri and I were with about 15 Asburyans on St. Simon's Island this weekend. Every year, a number of us from the church join about 500 other people from all over the country down on St. Simon's for a conference called January Adventure. And we had two wonderful speakers again this year. They were great. Our folks are really enjoying the experience. They will travel back to us this afternoon. Cheri and I came back yesterday to help celebrate the marriage of Ken Hall and Chuck Long, I'm going to have you stand, Ken and Chuck. They have been, where's Chuck? Hold on. You're really going to appreciate this they have been together. They got married yesterday. They have been together for 33 years. We've been talking a lot about weddings around here. Janet and Steve Wagner's daughter Claudia got married on New Year's Eve. Chuck and Ken got married yesterday, and I'm sure you've heard about the engagement of Ray Ellis and Randy Kennedy. Now comes the hard part for them. Who to invite to the wedding? You don't want to leave anyone out, but you can't feed the world. It's too expensive, right? Many of you have heard Cheri's and my wedding invitation story, and since it's her birthday, I should not tell it again, but I will. After all, we have some new folks here at Asbury who haven't heard it, and it's just too good a story. Please know that if Cheri tells the story, you may hear it a little differently. We got married in New York City. We had my family and friends coming up from Georgia. We had Cheri's family and friends coming up from Maryland, all to New York. Then we had all of our friends who were in New York, and not to mention all of our church folks at our church in New York City. But we couldn't feed everyone, so we had to make some tough decisions. And surprisingly, we agreed on almost all of those tough decisions. All of them except one. Cheri wanted to invite this couple that I didn't think we should invite, only because we didn't know them. Cheri had been in a Broadway show with the girl, but they were more like acquaintances. Neither one of us knew her husband, but they had gotten married 2 weeks before us, and they sent us an invitation, so Cheri felt obligated to invite them to our wedding. I tried to explain to her that this couple was making a lot more money than we were. She had done a lot of Broadway shows. Her husband was a big soap opera star at the time. They had a lot of money. We were already inviting half of the people in Georgia and in Maryland. We couldn't feed the world. Plus, we didn't really know them. Now, the funny thing is, in our marriage, I'm usually the more extravagant one, and Cheri the more practical one. But in this case, the roles were reversed. But I did what any smart groom should do: let the bride have her way. And I suggest that always to any couple and groom. So we go on our honeymoon, come back to New York, and it's time to open up the wedding presents. We get to the one that the couple gave us. Cheri unwraps the package, and it is a cookie jar. In fact, I've never done this before in telling the story. It was this cookie jar, and I actually really liked it and like it. I mean, it's like a old Victorian house. It reminds me a lot of the houses we have in Savannah. It reminded me of Savannah, and I was just impressed with the gift they gave. In fact, I thought maybe this couple had done some research and discovered that I was from Savannah and got us a Savannah-style house cookie jar. And I almost said, Cheri, you were right. I'm glad we invited that couple. I almost said that, but I didn't. And then Cheri starts examining the cookie jar. I mean, I couldn't believe it. She not only was looking at it like this, she took the lid off. I mean, she's really examining every inch of this jar, right? And suddenly she says, "What is this?" She discovered an envelope had been inside taped to the bottom of the cookie jar. She picked up the envelope, and written on the side were these words, "A little something to go along with the cookies." And she opened it up, and it was a check for $100. Now, back in 1986, $100 was a pretty good piece of change for a new young couple. And I almost said, Cheri, you were right. I'm glad we invited that couple. I almost said it, but I didn't. It was then that Cheri made another very important discovery. She said, wait a minute. This is strange. The check is not made out to us. The check was made out to the couple who had given us the gift. The couple who had just gotten married 2 weeks before us. They obviously didn't like the cookie jar as much as I did. They had given us a present they didn't want. Cheri then had to call her good friends to let them know we had a check for them, the one that was taped inside the gift they had given us, the gift they didn't want. Don't you wish you could have heard that conversation? Our text today says that Jesus, his disciples, and his mother Mary were all invited to a wedding. And as you know, weddings are accidents waiting to happen. Something almost always goes wrong during a service of matrimony. And that's okay, because that's usually the thing that helps us remember the wedding many years later. It's okay, but not in this case, because what has gone wrong at this wedding in Cana is not something you would giggle about many years later. In those days, the couple celebrated their marriage not with a honeymoon, but with a 7-day feast at the house of the groom. It's the third day of the celebration, and to everyone's surprise, the wine is giving out. We know the embarrassment we feel when we host a party and we run out of food, but this was very, very different. For that culture, running out of wine at a wedding was a disaster. The groom and his parents were expected to provide food and drinks for the guests in exchange for the great wedding gifts the couple received. If the feast ended prematurely, the groom was expected to offer a larger gift to his guests. So the lack of wine was not only a major embarrassment, a mark of shame. It could affect the couple's financial stability. It's only the third day and the wine is giving out. There are 4 more days to go. This couple is in trouble. What are they to do? Well, like every good Jewish mother, Mary wants to come to the rescue. She knows just the person who can solve the problem, her son Jesus. He can do no wrong. Now notice, Mary doesn't directly ask Jesus to solve the problem. She doesn't say, Jesus, do something. They're out of wine. Fix it. She simply brings to his attention the situation. but her intentions are not very subtle. Jesus, did you know they're out of wine? My mother does the same thing. Billy, you may want to call Aunt so-and-so. You haven't spoken to her in a while. I may want to. Billy, you may want to do this. You might want to do that. In other words, get off the sofa and do it. Mothers have their subtle and not so subtle ways of communicating things to their children. Jesus knows exactly what his mother is getting at. His negative response to her is not as rude sounding in the Greek language as it sounds in our translation, but he does let his mother know that he doesn't want to get involved. He almost sounds like he has had a degree in family therapy. Is that any of our business, Mother, yours or mine? Let's not be codependent about this. It's not our problem. And although Jesus tries to get out of the situation, he knows what Mama wants. And like most sons, he knows when Mama wants something done, and he knows when Mama really wants something done. And like a good son, he takes action. Now, I think it's interesting that Mary doesn't suggest ways for Jesus to solve the problem. She simply lays out the situation. They're out of wine. And then she waits for his response. She doesn't know what Jesus will do. For all she knows, Jesus and his friends will run down to the 7-Eleven and pick up some liquor. Or maybe he is going to sneak the couple out of town so they won't be embarrassed. Mary doesn't know what Jesus is going to do, but she trusts him. She knows him. She trusts that his response and his actions will fit the needs of the situation. And I believe it's important to invite God into our situations, our problematics, our life challenges, and to do it without any preconceived notion of what is the best and right way for it to be handled. My tendency is not to be like Mary. I'll invite God into a situation, but then I tend to let God know what is the best way to handle it. What's the best solution? Instead of letting go and trusting God. I mentioned this many years ago in a sermon, and church member, the late Don Valance, said to me, "Billy, your sermon reminded me about the minister who rushed home one day all excited, telling his wife that the First Baptist Church in a big town had just offered him the job as their senior pastor. He said, 'Honey, I'll be in my study on my knees before the Lord, seeking his guidance about this decision.' His wife said, 'Do you want me to come join you in prayer?' He said, 'No, go ahead and start packing.'" I hope in this new year all of us will work on letting go and trusting God more. Trusting God does not mean being complacent. Mary gets involved. She's working for a solution. It's also important to note that Jesus asked some people to fill 6 big jars with water. Before Jesus could change the water into wine, he had to have some water. We may want God to take action. We may want God to solve a problem, but we also have to do our part. I remember when I got my first big break in New York as an actor, I hadn't had very much luck getting work. I had a plane ticket, in fact, ready to come home, and I decided I would go to one last audition. But that day I woke up and I felt horrible. I said, "Well, I'm not going to go." And then I said, "Well, it's the last one before I go back to Georgia." And I didn't feel good, but I somehow went. Thank God and the Holy Spirit. I went, and fortunately I did, because I got the lead role, and that experience boosted my career and altered my life. The fact that I was cast was quite miraculous for a number of reasons that I won't go into today, but it would have not happened had I stayed home, had I not showed up. if I hadn't made an effort, if I hadn't gone to the audition, walked into the room, met the casting agents, and sung for them. And so this story at the wedding reminds us that whatever situation or problem we are facing, whether we are trying to find work or whether we're trying to work on social justice issues like racism, homophobia, or environmental issues, God can create miracles, but we also have to do our part. We have to give God some water to work with. As the Haitian Creole proverb states, God says, do your part and I'll do mine. We can no more turn water into wine than the servants at the wedding at Cana, but we can fill the empty jars with water. We can do that. We can take action. We can do what we can and then turn things over to God. One last thing I want to mention about this story has to do with the fact that it is given to us in the Gospel of John. Whenever we read anything from John's Gospel, our antennas should go up. We should be aware that the writer loved metaphors and symbolism. We should remember that in John's Gospel, there are numerous and various layers of truth and meaning throughout the text and in all the stories. For instance, John describes miraculous events in his gospel as signs, S-I-G-N-S, as signs. The miracles point us beyond the present, beyond what's happening now, to something that God wants to reveal to us. Mainly, that the Spirit of God is alive and working in the life of Jesus. And so the story of Jesus changing water into wine cannot be reduced to a simple magic trick. It cannot be reduced to the question, did it really happen or not? The more important question for John and for us is whether or not God is alive and at work in Jesus. John's answer to that question is an emphatic yes. He turned the water into wine, and he lets us know that God is in Jesus through these miracle stories. And I believe John wants us to know that God can be alive and at work in all people. Like water being changed into wine, this God power is able to transform people, is able to change people's lives and situations. This God power is able to enter into people like Martin Luther King Jr., who was able to act on situations, was able to do his part, yet was able to trust God, to let go and trust God even in the experiences of persecution and death. One of the speakers this weekend said that it used to be that being a Christian was dangerous. Now it is just about being boring, about keeping the status quo. Well, what he said is a great exaggeration. There are many, many Christians living on the edge, pushing the envelope, trusting God, doing their part. But it's so easy for us to become complacent. It's so easy for us to forget that the same Spirit that was inside of Jesus Christ and Martin Luther King is inside of us, inside of you and me. And we can do great things if we tap into it. So let us do our part. Just as Cheri took this cookie jar, unlike that other couple who didn't take the lid off and look inside, she did her part. She took the lid off, looked inside, and my goodness, there's another envelope that wasn't in here before. It says on it, invitation. Maybe it's to Randy and Ray's wedding. Could be. Have you sent them out yet? Don't have a date yet. Can't send it out. Here's what it says. Dear people of Asbury, you are invited to a life of meaning and purpose. Open yourself up to the possibility that each day you can be infused with the holy. Each day, I want to partner with you into living life with boldness and imagination. All you have to do is your part and trust me to do mine. With more love for you than you can imagine, your source and creator, God. I want to offer you and me the chance to respond to this invitation. Let us have a time of prayer. You can pray sitting down, time of prayer reflection there. Sometimes we like to open up our altar, and so today we'll do this. This is the beginning of a new year. And so the altar, feel free to come up. Jamie, David, and Gary are going to sing for us an incredible song about what we're talking about today. And so as they sing, feel free to pray where you are or to come here at our wonderful altar.